The great question. Imagine waking up one day next to someone you once loved deeply, perhaps you still do, and sensing an invisible wall between you. They smile, but something in your gut twists with distrust. You say the right words, you do the right things, yet something sabotages every tender moment. Fights erupt from nowhere. Silence feels heavier than words. You find yourself thinking, why do I always ruin the good things in my life? You try harder, you communicate more, you read self-help books, but the same cycle spins back into view like a carousel of your worst habits. And eventually, just like before, the person drifts, or you run, or you both implode quietly into separate emotional planets, each blaming the other for the cold. And so begins the question you've probably avoided asking your entire life. What if the person ruining your relationships is not really you, but a version of you that you never meant to meet? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden part of your psyche you desperately try to keep in the dark. But the paradox is this: what you suppress in silence returns in chaos. The parts of you that are angry, needy, jealous, manipulative, controlling, insecure, and self-hating do not vanish when ignored. They sharpen, they lie in wait, they whisper through your tone of voice, they gaze out through your glances, they pick your partners, they sabotage the intimacy you claim to crave, and worst of all, they know you better than you know yourself. But the tragedy is even deeper, because this hidden self, this shadow, isn't just about the bad parts you want to deny. It's also made up of the power you were told not to own, the confidence you buried, the boundaries you never set, the authenticity you traded for approval. All of that, your fire, your voice, your rage, your hunger, went into the same box as your shame, and now that sealed box lives in Takun Soul. He's seller of your soul, and no matter how polished you become on the surface, your relationships are still being haunted by what you've refused to feel. So what happens when you fall in love while your shadow remains unclaimed? You mistake intensity for intimacy. You project your unresolved wounds onto your partner. You expect them to save you from feelings you haven't dared to face yourself. You unconsciously recreate the exact same emotional wounds you swore you'd never go through again. Only this time, you're the one holding the knife. And yet, despite all this, you still convince yourself, this is just how I am. This is just how love is. This is just life. But what if none of that is true? What if this repeating heartbreak isn't fate? It's your shadow asking to be seen. Let's take it even further. What if your entire idea of you is incomplete without your shadow? What if the very person you think you are, the polite one, the good one, the caretaker, the strong one, is just half the story? And every relationship that enters your life is, at its core, a mirror designed to reflect the half you're trying to forget. Think about it. Have you ever felt unexplainable rage towards someone you love? Have you ever punished your partner for emotions you didn't know how to name? Have you ever ghosted someone just when things started to feel real? Have you ever clung too tightly to a toxic relationship because it felt familiar? These aren't accidents. These aren't personality flaws. These are signs that your shadow is speaking, and the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So here you are, standing on the edge of a terrifying question. What lives inside of you that you've never dared to look at? Because until you face your shadow, you will love with a blindfold on. You will build intimacy like a house of cards, always one wind gust away from collapse. You will attract people who reflect your wounds more than your worth. You will confuse being needed for being loved, and you will repeat this dance until it breaks you, or until you finally ask, "Who am I?" when I am no longer afraid of my own darkness. But be warned, to go down this path is not easy. It requires seeing things about yourself you were never supposed to see. It means mourning the identity you carefully built to stay safe. It means realizing that sometimes the villain in your love story wasn't the other person. Sometimes it was the ghost of who you refused to become. But in that shattering lies something beautiful, a chance at wholeness, a relationship not built on projection or performance, but on truth, on soul. So let's go there, into the cave, into the mirror, into the war zone of your inner world. Because until you face the part of you you've buried, you will never be truly loved, only tolerated. And you were not born to be tolerated. You were born to be seen, all of you, even the shadow. The hidden problem, its psychological, philosophical roots. If you were to peel back the surface of any conflict, be it an argument between lovers, the passive-aggressive silence of a close friend, or the gnawing feeling that something always sabotages your intimacy, you'd often find that what you're actually confronting is not the other person, but your own shadow. Not the person standing in front of you, but the suppressed, distorted parts of your psyche, those you've disowned, disavowed, and denied. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and he didn't mean it metaphorically. For Jung, the shadow was an active, living part of your unconscious mind, a chaotic, dark reservoir of emotions, instincts, and desires that you've locked away in your attempt to be good, polite, lovable, moral, or successful. And here's the devastating irony. The more you try to suppress these dark parts of ourself, the more power they gain over your life, especially in your relationships. Think about it. Why do we find ourselves repeating the same toxic cycles with different people? Why do we lash out irrationally over small things? Why do we fall for partners who push our buttons, break us down, or recreate old emotional wounds? Jung believed this wasn't random. It was psychic fate. The shadow, he said, always finds a way to surface, particularly through projection, our unconscious act of attributing our disowned traits onto others. The partner you accuse of being manipulative might simply mirror the control you deny you crave. The friend you call selfish might reflect your own suppressed desire to prioritize your needs. In Jung's view, romantic relationships are not just emotional bonds. They are psychological mirrors, arenas where the shadow plays out its long-repressed dramas. And often, the more intense the attraction, the deeper the unconscious recognition, the shadow recognizing itself in the other. Nietzsche once warned that whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. In relationships, we often fight the monsters we see in our partners, never realizing they are the monsters within us. The shadow, after all, isn't just cruelty or rage. It's also vulnerability you were taught to hide. It's your sexuality you were shamed for. It's your jealousy, your neediness, your ambition, your grief. Society, family, religion, and culture all teach you to hide these parts, to fit into neat roles: good boy, nice girl, strong man, humble woman. But in amputating these parts of yourself, you don't destroy them. You simply exile them to the unconscious. And what is repressed does not vanish. It festers, it waits, until someone gets close enough to provoke it. That's what Then the shadow erupts, in a fit of jealousy, in irrational sabotage, in emotional withdrawal, in cruelty masked as just being honest. You might even find yourself attracted to people who embody what you repress. People who are bold when you feel timid, dominant when you feel small, expressive when you've silenced yourself. At first, this feels intoxicating. Later, it feels unbearable. You love them, then resent them. You want to be close, then push them away. Jung believed that your ego, the self you present to the world, wants stability, image, and control. But your shadow wants truth, chaos, and wholeness. So it does what it must. It sabotages relationships that threaten to expose your fragmentation. It brings conflict where you thought there was harmony. Why? Not to destroy you, but to awaken you, to make you aware of the parts of yourself you've buried, to drag you back to the painful work of integration. Consider this. What if your relationship struggles aren't failures, but messages? What if they are not punishments, but summons from the unconscious? What if each heartbreak, betrayal, or painful argument is not a mistake, but a portal, a threshold into the parts of you that are crying out to be known, embraced, redeemed? Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you don't face your shadow, it doesn't just ruin your love life. It warps your entire perception. You don't see people as they are. You see them through the filter of your projections. You fall in love with illusions and break up with them when they fail to live up to your script. Or worse, You stay in relationships where you project your power, rage, or worth onto the other person, making them gods or monsters, never equals. This is not just a romantic tragedy, it's a psychological tragedy, because it keeps you from ever knowing who you truly are, or who the other person is. Instead, you live in a hall of mirrors, mistaking your reflection for reality. And the more emotionally intense the bond, the stronger the projection. That's why relationships are not just hard, they are sacred. They are spiritual crucibles in which the ego is shattered, the shadow is exposed, and the soul, if you let it, can finally become whole. But only if you are willing to stop blaming the other. Only if you are willing to turn inward and say, what part of me is this conflict trying to reveal? Only then does the sabotage become sacred. Only then do you begin to see that your greatest relationship challenges were never about the other person. They were always about you, not the you pretend to be, but the you that waits in the dark, hungry, desperate, ready to be seen. The unseen consequences. You may think you've managed your inner darkness. You may have even convinced yourself that you're self-aware, emotionally intelligent, and spiritually evolved. But the real trick of the shadow is not in its visible tantrums, not in the obvious slips of anger or jealousy. The shadow's greatest triumph is its subtlety. It manipulates your behavior from the depths, not with screams but with whispers. You don't cheat your partner. You just withdraw emotionally. You don't sabotage your friendships. You just repeatedly forget to reply. You don't destroy your career. You just happen to miss the deadlines that matter most. These are not random moments of laziness, fear, or forgetfulness. They are precisely orchestrated acts of resistance by the parts of you that were never allowed to speak. The parts you buried because they were too raw, too aggressive, too wild, or too wounded. When you ignore the shadow, it doesn't disappear. It burrows. And when it burrows, it does not sleep. It plans. In relationships, this unconscious sabotage can take 1,000 forms, each more insidious than the last. Have you ever noticed how some people are drawn to the very relationships that hurt them? They fall for the unavailable, the volatile, the cold, the controlling. Not because they want to suffer, but because their shadow is reliving an ancient script, often written in childhood. The parent who withheld love, the teacher who humiliated, the friend who betrayed, these become internal archetypes, and the shadow seeks them out like a moth to flame. Why? Because the unconscious craves repetition, not resolution. And the only way the shadow knows how to resolve trauma is by repeating it until you finally pay attention. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat. It's not masochism. It's an inner child still crying out for recognition, but doing so through adult self-destruction. This isn't just theory. It plays out in daily micro-behaviors. You meet someone kind and supportive, and suddenly you find them boring. You think, something's missing. What's missing is the chaos your shadow is used to. Peace feels foreign, even unsafe, or perhaps you constantly attract people who mistreat you, yet deep down you believe this is all you deserve. That belief didn't come from nowhere. It came from a buried voice that says you are not lovable. And the more you repress it, the more it dictates whom you love. Now think of how many breakups, betrayals, cold silences, and emotional chasms were not caused by external circumstances, but by these subtle distortions. Think of the people who left your life not because they were unkind, but because your shadow couldn't tolerate closeness, or because theirs couldn't. Carl Jung warned us that the less we are conscious of our shadow, the more it controls us. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And so people stumble from one failed relationship to another, wondering why love always eludes them, why connection always fades, why pain always returns. But it isn't fate, it's design. A design crafted by unexamined wounds, silent beliefs, and hidden archetypes. Your shadow is not just a ghost trailing behind you. It is a puppeteer operating from within. Neurologically, this plays out through what psychologists call schemas, deep cognitive structures formed in early life. If your early experiences taught you that closeness equals danger, your brain will fire warning signals when someone gets too near. If love was inconsistent, your nervous system will crave drama to feel alive. This is not just emotional, it is biological. Your amygdala, the brain's fear center, gets hijacked by these shadow patterns. And so even when logic says, this person is safe, your body screams, run! That's why shadow work isn't just about insight. It's about rewiring your entire inner world. The tragedy is that most people never realize this. They blame their ex or their partner or bad luck. They say, I guess I'm just not good at relationships. No, you're not bad at relationships. You've just been living out a script you didn't write, dictated by a shadow you've never met. Worse still, society rarely encourages us to confront this. We're told to be positive, to let go, to move on. But how do you move on from a wound you've never named? How do you heal a fracture you've denied even exists? Culturally, this denial is reinforced. In a world obsessed with perfection and performance, there is little space for the messy, the shameful, the broken. We curate our lives on social media, wear emotional masks at work, and engage in spiritual bypassing that turns trauma into buzzwords. We are told to rise above instead of going deeper in. And in doing so, we nourish the shadow. We feed it by pretending it doesn't exist. But here is the cruelest irony. The very things we repress in ourselves, rage, fear, neediness, insecurity, put out, are the same things we cannot accept in others, and so relationships become battlegrounds of mutual projection. Your partner becomes your father. Your friend becomes your bully. Your lover becomes the critic in your head. You don't just fall out of love, you fall into a hall of mirrors, and you mistake the reflection for reality. This is how relationships end, not with arguments, but with exhaustion, not with betrayal, but with misunderstanding. And the cost is enormous. Think of the intimacy never felt, the trust never formed, the love never fully expressed. Think of the generations of trauma passed down simply because someone refused to look inward. This is not just personal, it is collective. Each time a shadow remains unintegrated, its consequences ripple outward into families, communities, and cultures, and we are left wondering why the world feels so disconnected, so fractured, so lonely. But what if it doesn't have to be this way? What if the answer isn't found in more advice, more dating strategies, more communication techniques, but in something far older, far deeper, far more terrifying? What if the way forward is not up and out, but down and in? Into the dark caves where your shadow waits, not to destroy you, but to be seen. The rebellion. How to break free. So you've looked into the dark corridor of your own being. You've seen the faces you wear, the masks you thought were your personality, cracking. You've caught glimpses of the shadow, that quiet, hidden version of you that isn't evil, but forgotten. Now imagine a radical possibility. That everything you hate in others, everything that frustrates you, every pattern of heartbreak you repeat, isn't there to punish you, it's there to wake you up. That irritating coworker, the clingy partner, the dismissive friend, the distant parent, they aren't just bad for your peace. They are, in a very real sense, mirrors of the unconscious patterns you're refusing to meet within yourself. Jung once wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This is not a passive philosophical musing. It is a declaration of war against illusion. The moment you begin to take emotional responsibility for your reactions is the moment you start the rebellion. But rebellion doesn't mean aggression. It doesn't mean blaming yourself for having a shadow or trying to surgically remove your darker instincts like some metaphysical surgery. It means dialogue. It means turning inward with honesty, with horror, with compassion. It means standing in front of the monster within and saying, I see you. I know you're here. Let's talk. Shadow work is not aesthetic. It's not a poetic journal entry about my inner darkness. It is raw. It is the process of becoming emotionally literate in your own contradictions. One powerful method Jung implied but never fully systematized is active imagination. Sit down, close your eyes, and speak to your anger as if it were a person. Let it answer. What does your jealousy have to say about your dreams? What does your fear of intimacy whisper about your childhood? You'll be shocked. Your shadow isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to be heard. Another tool. Watch where you project. Projection is the shadow's favorite game. You see a stranger at a party and instantly decide you don't like them. They're arrogant. Why do you think that? Really dig. Is it because they're confident in ways you're not allowed to be? Or maybe you're angry at someone for being too emotional, but was emotional vulnerability punished in you as a child? We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. Breaking free from the sabotaging shadow starts with the painful practice of reversing the gaze. Every time you feel a disproportionate emotion, irrational jealousy, sudden hatred, freezing fear, ask yourself, what is this really pointing to inside me? Not as a way to excuse toxic behavior, but as a map. Because your feelings are maps. The rebellion means giving up the fantasy of purity. You are not just love and light and perfect intentions, you are also rage, lust, shame, envy, and craving. To ignore that is to live only half a life, but to integrate that, to walk with it, listen to it, dance with it, is to become whole. Wholeness doesn't mean goodness. It means you can sit across from someone you love, see their flaws, and still choose connection without falling into old patterns. It means you stop needing others to play out your wounds so you can feel validated in your pain. It means your love becomes less needy, less demanding, more stable, more real. Look at the great spiritual teachers, Jesus, Buddha, Rumi. None of them were nice in the conventional sense. They were fierce. They told the truth. They embraced paradox. They had integrated their shadows and thus didn't project them onto their disciples. They didn't need to manipulate through guilt or control. They weren't controlled by unconscious needs for validation. That is power. That is freedom. And it's available to you, but only if you are brave enough to face your own internal hell. One of the most rebellious acts in a world built on performance and persona is to become emotionally honest. To say, I feel insecure and I won't mask it with arrogance. To admit, I am scared of being abandoned and sometimes I push people away first. To confess, I crave control because chaos reminds me of my childhood. This level of self-disclosure, not to others but to yourself, is spiritual warfare against fragmentation. And slowly, as you begin to recognize your patterns, you begin to heal, not by destroying the shadow, but by making it conscious. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That is the rebellion. That is how you stop being a slave to the unconscious and begin walking the path of wholeness. And the beauty? Once you start doing this, your relationships change. Not because people become easier, but because you no longer demand they carry your projections. You stop needing your partner to be perfect. You stop fearing their flaws. You no longer seek completion in someone else because you are learning slowly and painfully to be complete within. This isn't about arriving, it's about walking with your shadow, not as an enemy, but as a guide. And as you do, the sabotages lessen. The wars become conversations, the triggers become teachings. This is the beginning of peace, not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of integration. Now, what lies beyond this rebellion? If the shadow has been our jailer, what does life look like on the other side of the bars? What is the final truth waiting at the end of this long, dark tunnel of mirrors? The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. There comes a moment, often not in a moment of triumph, but in a quiet hour of defeat, where you finally turn inward and ask not, what is wrong with them? But what am I not seeing in myself? The final, most powerful realization isn't some cosmic truth delivered from a mountaintop or a gleaming insight handed down by ancient sages. It's something much more uncomfortable. You realize that the monster you've been running from in every relationship, the storm you've been blaming on others, the ache you've been trying to silence, wasn't out there. It's in you. And not just in you. It is you. The shadow, long disowned, turns out to be the very part of you with the greatest capacity for transformation, because it is the one part of you you've never truly listened to. It's not evil. It's not corrupt. It's simply the part that was buried when you learned that being loved meant being acceptable. And so the child who cried too much, the teen who raged without apology, the adult who secretly feared being a burden, They all got locked away. But Jung didn't believe that healing came from perfection. He believed it came from wholeness, and wholeness demands that you confront, embrace, and integrate even the parts you've been taught to hate. The final truth is this: until you bring your shadow into consciousness, it will sabotage your relationships in the exact pattern that you most fear. Why? Because the psyche doesn't seek happiness. It seeks completeness. And if your conscious self is determined to only show light, your unconscious will balance that by pulling you back into darkness. It will draw toward you those who provoke your jealousy, your insecurity, your pride, your rage, not to punish you, but to complete you. Every argument you repeat, every lover you resent, every friend who betrays you, it's not about them. It's about the self within you crying out to be seen. When you begin to see this, truly see it, everything shifts. Suddenly, you understand why you're drawn to the people you are. The charming narcissist wasn't a random choice. They reflect your own hidden vanity and your deep fear of being overlooked. The emotionally unavailable partner wasn't an accident. They echo your own tendency to withhold love to protect yourself. The friend who always talks over you is the mirror of your own unexpressed voice, still trapped in the basement of your soul. And so the battlefield of relationships becomes a sacred map. Every wound inflicted by another reveals a wound you've inflicted upon yourself. Every betrayal teaches you where you have betrayed your own authenticity. Every heartbreak is an invitation back to the heart you've long abandoned, your own. In this light, pain becomes sacred. Not something to escape, but something to understand. Not something to destroy, but something to befriend. This is where individuation truly begins. Jung called individuation the process of becoming the self, not the socially groomed version of you, not the idealized persona, but the raw, integrated soul that accepts its own contradictions. You are not just the light. You are the tension between the opposites. You are both the saint and the saboteur, the healer and the heretic, the child seeking safety and the warrior demanding truth. And only when you embrace both can you ever offer another human being true intimacy, because otherwise all you're offering is performance. But wholeness, oh wholeness, is love that does not flinch. Now imagine what it means to love from this place, no longer needing the other person to complete you because you've stopped editing yourself, no longer projecting the lost parts of you onto them because you've reclaimed them, no longer reacting from invisible wounds, but responding from conscious presence. Suddenly, love becomes less about fixing, pleasing, or protecting, and more about witnessing, revealing, and becoming. You stop looking for someone to fill the void, and instead you open that void like a cave full of hidden treasure. You speak what you've never said. You feel what you've always numbed. You break the spell of who you thought you had to be, and become the mystery of who you truly are. But this comes at a cost. The cost is your illusions, your victim stories, your righteous indignation, your comforting narratives about how the world is to blame. You must burn those to the ground, because as long as your shadow remains unseen, your suffering will remain recycled. The same heartbreak, in different faces, the same rage, in different arguments, the same loneliness in the middle of crowded rooms. But once you face it, truly face it, not with judgment, but with awe, you become something terrifying and magnificent. You become free. And freedom, Jung would say, isn't the absence of shadow. It's the eye, an integration of it. It's when you can look in the mirror and no longer flinch. It's when you can sit with your partner, your friend, your enemy, and no longer need them to change for you to feel safe, because you have changed, because you have remembered, because you have finally come home to yourself. So, if you've ever wondered why your relationships feel like riddles you can't solve, maybe it's time to stop solving and start listening, not to them, to you, to the silence beneath the defensiveness, to the ache beneath the anger, to the fear beneath the control. Your shadow is not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to give you back the pieces of yourself you abandoned in order to survive. And when you take those pieces back, when you let them speak, when you hold them without shame, you will find the thing you were looking for in every relationship. Not love from another, but love from within. Because the ultimate truth is this: the parts of you that sabotage love were always just the parts that were starving for it. Would you like me to generate a poetic cinematic outro paragraph to close the entire script with emotional, the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization? And now, standing here, half in light, half in shadow, you face the ultimate paradox. Everything you feared about your shadow was never the full story. What if the aspects of yourself that you've hidden, suppressed, or feared weren't just dangerous, but sacred? What if your darkest parts were never enemies to be slain, but allies waiting to be integrated? Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And here lies the cosmic joke. The very traits you were taught to hate, the impulses you've buried, the feelings you've dismissed, those are the keys to your wholeness. You cannot become fully yourself while amputating half of who you are. Every time you reject your jealousy, your rage, your insecurities, your sexual fantasies, your neediness, you're rejecting your own vitality. You're cutting yourself off from the wellspring of life, and so the shadow becomes not just the destroyer of relationships, but the guardian of authenticity. It is not the villain in your story, but the gatekeeper to your inner kingdom. Imagine what it would mean to embrace this, to stop moralizing your emotions and begin listening to them, to allow your shame to teach you what you secretly long for, to hear your anger whisper what you feel is unjust, to let your fear illuminate what you value most. What if your shadow isn't the part of you that wants to ruin everything, but the part that remembers your soul's original blueprint, the part that screams when you betray yourself, the part that throws tantrums when you live a life that is too small for you? Integration, then, is not about taming the shadow. It's about learning to dance with it. You cannot love another person completely until you love your own brokenness. You cannot be intimate until you stop hiding from your own truths. The depth of your relationship with others will never exceed the depth of your relationship with your shadow. And this is why your shadow sabotages love. Not because it wants to, but because it has no choice. It's screaming for your attention. It is tired of being ignored. It doesn't want to stay in the basement. It wants to sit at the table. When you finally turn toward it, something profound happens. Your judgments begin to soften. You start to recognize in others the very traits you've repressed in yourself. The manipulative partner you hated, perhaps they reflect your own suppressed need to assert control. The emotionally unavailable person you're drawn to, maybe they mirror the parts of you that don't feel safe receiving love. Your relationships become alchemical mirrors, each one showing you exactly what you need to integrate. And suddenly, love becomes a crucible for transformation. No longer a fairy tale to escape into, but a sacred fire to walk through. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, was the ultimate aim of the human journey. And individuation demands shadow work, not optional, not cosmetic, essential. Because as long as you deny any part of yourself, that part will dominate you from the unconscious. But when you make it conscious, when you look it in the eye and say, "I see you, I accept you," you reclaim your inner kingdom. The true tragedy is not that we have shadows. The true tragedy is that we mistake them for monsters when they were, all along, our deepest teachers. And so the final realization isn't that your shadow sabotages your relationships. It's that your shadow reveals what needs to be healed for love to be real. It breaks what is false so you can build what is true. It ruins the illusions so that intimacy can be born. It's not there to punish you. It's there to free you. But only if you're willing to face it. So the next time you find yourself triggered, lashing out, withdrawing, people-pleasing, or sabotaging yet another connection, pause. Don't rush to fix it. Don't reach for blame. Sit in that fire. Ask your shadow, "What are you trying to tell me?" You may be stunned by what it says. Perhaps it will show you the child you used to be who never felt good enough. Perhaps it will point to the moment you learned that love had to be earned or that vulnerability led to pain. Perhaps it will ask you to feel what you've avoided for years. And if you have the courage to listen, to feel, to welcome it all, you may find that your relationships begin to transform, not because you've found the perfect partner, but because you've stopped hiding from yourself. And in that raw honesty, real intimacy is finally possible. You will never be whole by staying in the light. The wholeness you seek requires descending into the depths. Sit, ting with your shadow and bringing it home. Because only when you hold all of yourself, light and dark, strength and wound, beauty and ugliness, can you offer something true to another. And only then will love stop being a battlefield and become what it was always meant to be, a mirror, a furnace, a sanctuary. So the next time you feel your shadow stir, don't run, don't panic, bow, invite it to speak. And listen, because it may just be the part of you that knows the way back to love. And now, at the far end of this winding road, where masks have been dropped, shadows acknowledged, and illusions shattered, there stands a truth that is both profoundly simple and excruciatingly difficult to live by. It is the realization that you are never merely at war with others. Your struggle was never truly about the narcissistic ex, the dismissive partner, the emotionally unavailable friend, the domineering parent. All these encounters were but echoes, reflections bouncing off the inner cavern where your unlived self, your shadow, had long been imprisoned. Imagine finally understanding that the enemy you believed was outside had always been the unconscious part of yourself pleading for integration. It's a painful liberation, a kind of awakening that doesn't arrive with trumpets or applause, but with a heavy silence, a silence pregnant with responsibility. You were the saboteur, but you were also the one with the key. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is the ultimate truth most people are never willing to face. Enlightenment is not blissful ignorance. It is not pretending that your flaws don't matter or that your past didn't hurt you. It is a brutal, uncompromising confrontation with your inner abyss. But in doing so, in dragging the shadow into the light of consciousness, you don't just understand yourself better, you rewire the machinery of your reality. Your relationships stop being battlegrounds and start becoming sacred mirrors. Your partner is no longer your adversary, but your reflection. Your loneliness no longer a void, but a signal. Your triggers no longer evidence of others' cruelty, but an invitation inward. The greatest paradox is that your wholeness lies in your brokenness. The more deeply you can sit with the shame, the more powerfully you can love. The more honestly you can admit to your manipulations, projections, and emotional armor, the more capable you become of experiencing true intimacy. You see, the shadow is not your enemy. It is your exiled potential. That rage you hide, it's your strength misdirected. That jealousy you bury, it's your capacity for desire and aliveness unclaimed. That insecurity you numb, it's the longing to be deeply known, raw and unfiltered. To reject the shadow is to amputate half your soul, but to embrace it is to reclaim your fire. What this means in your daily life is revolutionary. It means the next time you're triggered by your partner, you pause, you turn the question inward. What part of me feels unseen, unloved, or abandoned right now? It means the next time you find yourself drawn to someone emotionally unavailable, you no longer blame them. You ask why availability feels unsafe to you. It means you stop outsourcing your healing. You no longer expect others to complete you, fix you, or make up for your childhood wounds. You become your own mirror, your own healer, your own witness. That is the ultimate emancipation. That is what it means to truly become whole. And no, this path is not glamorous. It is not clean. There will be moments when you feel like you are unraveling, when you long to return to the numbness of projection and blame. But those who walk this road, truly walk it, are never the same again. They move through the world differently. Their eyes see. Often, their words deepen. Their love becomes an act of seeing, not controlling. They no longer need perfection in others because they've made peace with their own imperfections. They can love without chains, commit without fear, and speak without masks. That is what it means to live from integration, not fragmentation. So now, take a breath. Let it fill you not with answers, but with space. Space to feel, space to unlearn, space to begin again. You are not broken, you are unfinished, and in that unfinishedness lies your greatest beauty. The shadow is not here to ruin your relationships, it is here to redeem them. It is not here to sabotage love, but to make it real. Authentic love is not found in light alone, but in the courageous sharing of our darkness. You cannot truly be loved until you are truly seen. And you cannot be truly seen until you are willing to see yourself, all of yourself. And so, the final, most powerful realization is this: your shadow is your compass. Where it points, healing waits. Where it screams, truth hides. Where it sabotages, freedom beckons. Follow it, face it, embrace it, because in the heart of your darkness lives the only love that can ever set you free.